Jump right in. As I said, I'm so glad to be having this conversation with Carolyn and Marisol. We're going to be digging into this concept of what it means to be restored and connected. And so they've really come up with, this idea about how we can build connections and heal, and really transform ourselves and the systems that we're a part of. And so we thought the best way to do this would be the way we've been doing it for the last few months, which is just have a conversation. So Marisol, if you'll start us off, I'd love to just hear from you. Just give a quick introduction and then hand it off, and we'll do the same thing with Carolyn.
Hi, everybody. I am Marisol Quevedo Rerucha. I am the mother of Camerina, Emilia, and Sofia. My two oldest daughters are adults. They're 26 and 25 years old, and Sofia is 15, so sophomore in high school. I'm the daughter of Irma and Abraham, who my mom was born and raised in San Diego, California, where I was born and raised and I still live. And my dad was from a family of farm workers. He's one of 16. I'm also the grandmother to Isabela Luna and Cynthia Iliana. Luna is 4 years old. Cynthia Iliana is going to be 8 months old, and we're expecting a grandson in February. And I'm also the very proud granddaughter of Camerina, who was from Gomez Palacio, Durango, and Alejandro, who was born in Baja California and who was raised in the missions in California, and also Carmen and Francisco, who were both from Sonora. And just very happy to be here talking about the work that I think is so important for us as individuals and also within our systems. And with that, I'd like for Carolyn to introduce herself.
Hello, everybody. I am Carolyn Gary, and I'm really excited to be sharing this time with you tonight. And especially with my good friends, Isaac and Marisol. Marisol and I have known each other for a very long time, and we've been kind of, if you will, like soulmates in this work, and have really started to dig in even more so lately. I am coming to you live from Colorado Springs. I'm like right at the base of Pikes Peak, which is one of our 14ers here. I landed here in 2005. I actually grew up in San Diego and then taught for 10 years and got into school administration on the island of Kauai. And from there worked on a school redesign project in Berkeley for about 6 years. And I have been in Colorado since then. Big mountain biker, love to mountain bike. My family, I'm the mother of a 17-year-old who is a senior in this very interesting time right now. And we also have my sister who shares our household with us. She's developmentally disabled, and I learn from her every day. My husband and I have really kind of embraced just the lifestyle here in Colorado. We're big outdoor people, but I've also been able to really engage in a lot of different aspects of my learning and my work in education here in Colorado. So can't wait to share more through this awesome conversation that we're going to have tonight.
Thank you both. And it's so interesting to hear the ways you introduce yourselves reveal so much about that inner self that both of you have spent the time getting to know. I love how Marisol, really, you shared yourself through your connection to others, and Carolyn through this reflection about yourself and how you relate to those people you love. And I do have to say, you to have a unique working relationship, because I feel like every time I talk to one of you, you're saying, well, I just talked to, or we get on and have a conversation and you've just been on for an hour and a half planning and discussing. So let's jump into this and just share what drew you to this work, because you've both dedicated a significant portion of your life developing this thinking and working with so many people around transformation and healing. So what instigated this passion?
Well, and I think the passion, so the reason why I introduce myself the way that I do is because I really believe that this voice that you're hearing is the product of the prayers and the love and the hopes and the challenges of my ancestors. And I also carry those same hopes and challenges and prayers for my future ancestors. And so it's very grounding to me as a reminder of who I am and where I've come from. And that even without knowing me, that I was prayed for and that this work was prayed over. And so I just wanted to share that. And so what I didn't share, I'm an educator. I also am currently the chief of strategy and partnerships for the National Parents Union. As an educator, so I left the educational system a year and a half ago. I was an English teacher, I was a school administrator, I became an assistant principal, and the director of an alternative charter high school. So I've been both in the traditional public education system and the charter system. And then I moved to the county office where I worked in the juvenile court system. And so part of, I think part of my origin story with the work really comes from just my own experience in life. In high school, I graduated in 1992. And I will say that, I was absolutely a mixture of the product of my environment and also a product of my community environment, the greater environment, and then also of my family. In the community, I had a friend that was selling drugs for her boyfriend in the school halls out of her locker. I had multiple friends that became pregnant. I myself became pregnant at 19, right out of high school. And in high school, my experience was, my friends were very bright, like we were smart. We didn't do that great in school, but there were so many other things that were important to us, but we were able to get away with a lot of things. We were able to get away from not getting caught, and part of that was because we told very convenient lies that the adults in the school believed. And, a lot of my friends and myself had suffered from sexual abuse. I had friends that were in high school, I had a friend that was being abused by her mother's boyfriend. There were a lot of reasons why we were not doing well academically. We graduated. I actually had a 0.5 GPA at one point and had to take night school classes my senior year to graduate. And so part of my desire to get into education in this work was I wanted to be the educator that we didn't have, the person that was observing and really wasn't buying the bullshit that we were trying to sell, to not really do the work and get the resources that we needed. And so for me, this work really starts from within. One of the things that I think is really critical is that I have no business talking about healing or transformation or this work if I am not doing the work on my own healing and dealing with my own trauma, and really getting to know myself in both the ugly ways and accepting myself in the very ugly human ways, which to me are those issues of like ego, issues of control, when I get my self-esteem gets triggered, but then also the really good ways. So like really like being able to accept the gifts that I have, being able to accept the positive things about myself. So and all of that is getting to know me. And so for me, the work really starts from within, because by me genuinely knowing who I am, why I am, what my motivations are, being thoughtful about what I'm doing, thinking about if I'm emotionally reacting to something, like really being thoughtful and clear about those things and doing that work. Again, I have a therapist, I have really good friends, I have all of these ways of doing it, but that really allows me to then be able to connect with others and be able to have that human connection with others that can then allow them to do their work. Because one of the things that I've noticed is that when we are authentic and vulnerable and share our shit, excuse my language, but really like share our stuff.
We're all adults here.
well, that allows other people to share and start to open up. And that starts that process of healing. So really for me, like what drew me to this work, I think that my path and my journey of my own healing, working in my trauma, and my commitment to trying to be the best version of myself is what has brought me here.
And I did not know some of that, but there, having had the privilege to actually be in your physical presence pre-COVID, there's something about you that you can kind of feel that. You can feel that you know yourself and that there's something you've done to make yourself open to others. Because within just a few minutes of getting to talk to you or be with you, you feel very comfortable and open and accepting. And I think how powerful if we can all be that for our students, what a change that can make.
Well, and the one thing I want to add is, and it's, we have to start it for ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
but we do it without judgment. So like accepting yourself without judging yourself, accepting that good, accepting the bad, accepting the humanity without the judgment. And the work isn't just with our students, the work is also with our staff,
Mm-hmm.
which is critical because the adults in our spaces need to have the opportunities to do this work as well.
Thank you. And Carolyn, I know that you two have been partners in crime for quite some time, but share your story. What brought you to this work?
So I would say that, my story really, growing up in San Diego, I wasn't born in San Diego, but growing up, I moved around a lot, a lot, a lot. And so by the time that I got to college, and then I actually worked in a surf camp when I was in college, and that's how I landed on the island of Kauai. And I started my first job teaching Spanish there. And I realized I just didn't want to move anymore. And it was interesting because Hawaii, for the first time, very much felt like home to me. Like I just felt this connection. But in that experience, I also knew that as a person, a white person coming to the island of Kauai, where there was so much history and a lot of very painful history, that I needed to understand, because if I wanted to be more than a visitor and actually be a part of that community, not just as an educator, but really truly part of the community, then I really wanted to know more. And the school that I worked at was part of a very large complex where it was an elementary, a middle school, and a high school, all in one like shared space, essentially. The elementary school at that time, there were 1,800 students. So I worked at the high school, a lot of poverty, a huge disparity. You had students from the North Shore who were pretty privileged and wealthy, and then you had some of our Hawaiian students who were living in encampments, on the beach. And so there was a friction, but there was also this sense that there was a lot of pain, and I would work very closely with elementary students as well. And so what I started to really realize on a deep level is that, yes, there was a lot of pain and it came out in different ways. And then in some level, I had some responsibility, and it's not like a calling, but a responsibility being a part of that shared space on the island to give back in some way. And I needed to figure that out. And I think that was really like my very first experience of feeling that deep ownership, if you will, of really getting to know the stories, not just because it's something that you do, but something that you need to do if you are going to belong as well. And so that was kind of, I would say, my first experience. When I was there in Kauai, we were hit by the Hurricane Iniki, that just devastated the island. And at the time, there was a very large hurricane also in Florida that sort of took center stage because it was, in a very populated area.
Right.
So essentially, we were just like devastated for a long time. And there was a lot of trauma that was experienced there. And what I also realized is that when you layer a universal trauma like that on top of just ongoing crisis, on top of historical trauma, a lot of things start to surface. And I had no words for it at that time. I just had that sense that there was a lot of need there. And then how do you start to get your arms around that as an individual and from a community perspective when there is that kind of hurt? And it took a good 10 years for the island to recover. And then when I landed in Berkeley, my first year at Berkeley, there was an arsonist that was running around Berkeley Unified, actually the high school. 27 fires were set and the administration building like burned down in the middle of the day at noon. And again, you know, a lot of people on edge. We went through 4 principals. We were going through accreditation, a school redesign process. And there was a lot of tension. On top of that, we also had students who were living on campus because they were homeless. And a massive, massive gap in terms of achievement. And I knew that that place wasn't going to be home for us forever. There was no way we could afford it, one. But I still felt this massive responsibility to, again, belong, again, to be a part of that community and to figure out like, how do we really address the historical hurt that was part of that area, as well as what we were seeing in terms of students and staff not doing well when there's like one crisis after another layered upon each other. And so coming to Colorado, I led a school, 2 charter schools in the urban corridor of Colorado Springs, and we became a community-based school. And it was at that point in time that I started to do some research around the impact of early trauma on learning and started to put the dots together in terms of what I sensed and what I was seeing throughout my various experiences, and then what it meant when a staff was fully committed and dedicated to the well-being of the students and the families, where you really put your arms around it, around the work and around the hard work of understanding not just how students learn, but how all of these various areas impact their learning, and what we can do as a school community to really mitigate sometimes that residual effect. And I feel that at that time we did some really amazing work that wasn't always documented or noted in the standardized achievement scores. And so sometimes it was really hard to bring that story forward. And it was at that point in time that I met Marisol, because we were both like leaders within these environments, and we both got it, you know, that not just the work that needed to be done, the story that needed to be told, but also the fight that we were up against, because being trauma informed, that wasn't part of the vernacular at that point, right? So that's where we really kind of started this kinship, if you will. Fast forward, I don't know, Marisol, maybe 7, 8 years later, when the pandemic hit, we were both in this period of kind of transforming our work lives, and we started to meet up every day, and that's been our world for like the last 1.5 years, really focused on how do we now take this to the next level, in terms of really working within these systems. Because I would say if there's any time that we need healing and feeling connected and really understanding it at that level, it's now.
That's so true. And, you know, Paul and I, we all had a meeting with our internal team the other day, and we were sharing so many ways that even though I'm in a very safe, privileged environment, just the things we're dealing with our families and our friends, and how there are these divisions that are finding their way even into our closest relationships. I'm hearing some kind of patterns and trends that you've each experienced and or been made aware of, these moments of inequity, or even these systems that are in place that were designed either intentionally or not, but they really structure in these inequities. But I'm also hearing that as you find these challenges, you've both taken action and found ways to pull people together. So I wonder if you can speak just a bit to kind of pull together those inequities you've experienced, and with that, you know, what it is you recognize in these structures, because then we can get into really how this mindset and heartset can make shifts. And I'm seeing some comments come up about, you know, people remembering others being resentful of their needs or the needs of their students because they almost kind of get in the way, like you said, of those things that are easy to measure, those end of grade tests or end of course tests, as well as, you know, the importance of recognizing these needs, especially often our lower income communities. It gets layered in. So let me stop talking, but I just want to appreciate all the comments that people are making, and hear some more from the two of you.
So I would say that in this work, equity has to be at the forefront of and a recognition of what comes into play when you are talking about communities that have experienced historical trauma, one, that, and then within that you have families that have experienced generational trauma, you know, and then you're working with students, you know, who also have experienced early trauma. And so I want to talk about equity because we come at often education from, like what you said, these very discrete things that can be measured. When I was the leader of Scholars to Leaders, which was our community-based school, we were trying to come up with some ways to really tell the story of the kindergartner who started at 6 years old every day screaming and running from the building because the fear was so great. And you fast forward to that same child in third grade being able to just shine on exhibition day and being able to like be that mentor for the younger students. That was a massive story of transformation. And when we talk about equity, I mean, that holds to me a place more dear than any kind of massive jump that you would document in your like NWA scores, for example, because that's something that that child's going to take forward, right? Because there's solid footing there. So when we look at equity, we have to also understand that everything is interconnected. And that often, because we don't recognize the impact and the need for healing and that residual impact from, say, early trauma, we look at things like behaviors, and then behaviors tend to pigeonhole children. And then from that, you get these systems and structures that just create this further divide in terms of where they have to leap just in order to be able to make it to that next level. And so I feel like that's where it's a whole systemic approach that has to happen with equity as the piece of it, but understanding that there are all of these interconnected components that have to be integrated into it.
Yeah, when I think about just kind of the overall question about equity in education and the inequities that exist, I really I think about like, who is this educational system built for? And who has been denied a public education? And I'm thinking historically, right? So the system was created in that, what is that word? But in that model, like that factory mindset model.
Right.
And it was really created for white children. And inequitable, you know, a high quality education has been denied Black and brown children. You look at how the system is set up, how education is set up, you know, it's very much about literacy, about reading, writing, and arithmetic. So those things that, so those values, I think, that are very have very Greco-Roman foundations. And when you think about also then how the traditions of our Black, Indigenous, brown communities, there's very oral traditions. There's also a lot of movement. And so I think about this, there's cultural inequities, because the understanding of culture, aside from the dominant culture of the United States, which has been the dominant white culture, like it's almost a special thing to have somebody that's culturally responsive and really including ways of learning for our Black and our Brown and our Indigenous students. I love Title VII and that it really spells out like what our Indigenous students, like what cultural, that they need a cultural based curriculum. Like I love that, but that's where it stops. So I think like we have to look at how our system was created and why it was created, for who it was created, to really understand then how we can wind up with a system that is really racist at its core, and oppressive to a huge majority of students. And thinking about, you know, how have systems, I think some of the issues I think also that exist, and I think it's important to call out, is that sometimes our system is more about the adults as opposed to the kids. And that is something that we as a nation have to come to some agreement to, and some understanding, that what does it mean really to focus and provide a high quality public education for each individual student. And you think about then, like, what do parents have little to no say on who the teacher is that their students have. There is no sharing as to why that teacher is the best teacher for your student or for your child. There's not that thought so much about, like, are these I think like structural thought about placement, and then also structural thought around even school placement. So I worked in a district that if we were capped at our numbers and our grade levels, that district would, any kids coming in, instead of coming to their neighborhood school, they would get the bus to another school. And that is that is a decision based on numbers as opposed to what's right for kids. And our systems do not do things like really let parents know about all of the programs that exist in those systems that could be a great match for their kid. So I think like you think about the structure and the inequities. Who are the people that know about magnet programs? Like, who are the people that have the ability to really do the research and get in the know of things? And where are those programs being offered? So I think there's so many layers to these inequities, that I think it's really important to keep that, like, the eye on what the questions are, who was made for this, or I'm sorry, who was the system made for, who has been denied the system, and then also what are all of the inequities at every single level. So there's just so much, Isaac, that this question it's very heavy for me. But I also need to say, like, some of the other issues have to do with leadership. If you have a school or a district or a systems leader who is not healthy emotionally or mentally, that person can be extremely destructive. If that person really like has, and some of the, you know, mental emotional issues could be like wanting to be liked, and their being liked is more important than making the right decisions for kids, that can really cause a lot of dysfunction and a lot of issues in a system, which lead, you know, to a rise in inequities. So I think, you know, like it's just such a heavy question, and there's so many different layers to it.
And I know we're going to be continuing this conversation a few more times in the coming year, but it's so deep and so heavy because there is so much history and so much laid upon it, and because it's so easy to not see it because it's how it's been. So
it's very convenient to not see it because the work is hard.
Yeah. Well, and I'm someone who benefits from a system like that. The system's designed for someone with my background. Both my parents are college educated, white, heterosexual male, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I have to admit that it took me being a teacher and learning from my students and their families that my experience was not common in school. I knew my life experience was uncommon, but really getting to see, you know, what I experienced was not necessarily how learning works. I had so many opportunities before we got to the subject. And so many people are sharing similar thoughts and ideas, like you said, like it starts and ends with leadership to some extent.
Yeah.
And that leadership begins with hiring, and it begins with impacting policy. I had the opportunity to work with a group called Hope Street Group, who essentially the design was to connect policymakers and those who policy impacts. And they did it, obviously I was in the education branch, but they did an education, nursing, business. And, you know, this is a little off of our things we talked about before, but this might be an opportunity to mention the National Parents Union and the work you do, and really how that can serve as an opportunity to share voice and to make these connections.
Well, and one of the things that I love that one of our parents said, Bernita Bradley, she says, if it is not done with us, then it is not for us.
Oh,
And
man.
I think that turns what education is used to on its head.
Mm-hmm.
I was in, like I said, I was in education for a very long time. I was an educational leader, I don't know, at least 14 years, maybe more. And you know, the things that I've heard, the things that teachers have said, that the way that systems are set up, and I got to tell you, the job is hard.
Yeah.
The job is overwhelming. But if you commit to doing the job, then you got to do the job. And that includes meaningful parent engagement. That means opening the doors and welcoming parents, not for your convenience, but for theirs. And that can be a really difficult thing to do. What we're doing, so the National Parents Union, we're a brand new organization, started in January, and we are really representing the voices of all parents, including parents who are incarcerated, parents in recovery, parents of low-income students, and parents of color. And those, I just want to say, those are not the same thing.
Yes, yeah.
And also parents with kids with special needs, and those traditional parents, also who have been very successful in the parent engagement world. And we have both a policy strategy. We are also embracing a new campaign called Every Family Heals, doing the social and emotional learning work with parents, with the goal of helping them learn to become ambassadors so that they can go back to the school sites and both, build that bridge with the school around social and emotional learning, not just in practice, but also in policy. And so we're really about, giving parents and not just fighting for a seat at the table, but like building our own seats to be there at the table, because this is about our children. And I think so, education, like I said, being an educator, being an educational leader is really hard, but we are not the answer. Together with our parents, with our staff, with our community, is how we get the answers to what is best for our kids. And so I don't know if I went off on a tangent a little bit, but this work that we're talking about, Carolyn has been doing, she just kind of talked a little bit about her school, but you have defining moments in life. One of the defining moments in my life that changed the trajectory for me in many ways was something that Carolyn told me in the back of a cab. I think it was in DC, I don't remember, but she was talking about her school. And this was 8 years ago at least, and she was talking about resiliency and talking about trauma and talking about the fact that she had social workers and she had a therapist working for her kids in her K-8 school. And I was sitting there listening to her like, how did you make this happen? I was in an alternative high school with kids with so many, and like just wanting those resources and those supports. And she turned to me and she said, I wrote a grant. Like, she made it happen for her kids in her community before the system was even talking about this work. And she just had this eye on it. And so I need to acknowledge that. I need to acknowledge her and the work that she's done. And I want to hear from her so I can drink my water. But also, like, because of that, I started writing grants. I've been able to provide really millions of dollars of support for our most marginalized students because of the work that she did at her school.
Thank you. And right as Carolyn starts, Marisol, remind me, what was the healing group you mentioned? I was going to share that out with people.
Oh, it's not a group. It's our new campaign. It's our new campaign. It's Every Family Heals.
Got it.
We're going to kick off, I think Monday's our kickoff date. So I have a blog that I'm working on that we're going to push out. We'll probably have a press release, and then working also on all of our infographics. So every month we're focusing on a different theme. So it's a multi-pronged approach: social media, information, training, advocacy.
Excellent. And I'm sure we'll be able to share those blogs and things through the Core Communique, our TCC blog. So all those of you who are on, check out National Parents Union, and we'll make sure to cross-pollinate these great ideas. So Carolyn, I'd love for you to kind of respond and add on, and then segue us also into this idea of what does it mean to approach these issues with mindset and heart set in mind, and how do we make this change in ourselves and our systems?
Okay. And so going, I guess, back to what Marisol was talking about at that point in time when it was, we called our school kind of this mighty, small but mighty school. I think at the time we were about 240 students. And what was interesting about us is that, Colorado Springs, Colorado, you don't often, think just like Kauai, when people think of Kauai, you don't often associate that with this generational trauma, this historical trauma, but it's there, right? And so one of the things when I established that school was that we became the center based upon our staff and based upon the model where a lot of agencies would send their families and their students. We would receive first graders sometimes that came to our school who had been to 6 other schools, because they were essentially pushed out and moved on from school to school. And so being that place where a lot of families and students landed, our goal was then to keep them there, because we knew, if we could keep them there, then we could start to rebuild that trust that's so necessary to have, and that's a trust in us. To also engage with us for the long haul so that we can really make this work, because we felt like that was a true partnership. And in order to really have that approach, we also had to recognize that it wasn't the students. The students didn't come by themselves solo. They came connected to a whole network of supports, and you had to honor those supports as well. And so that was also a big part of our program, so that I was able to find funding, yes, for to have a full-time social worker and to have additional mental health supports. But I also received funding for our adult English learners so that they could then work with their children on EL practices. But also, one thing that I'd like to say is that when we talk about equity, you talked about it, Isaac, you talked about the experiences that you had growing up, and how that you never even thought about it until you started to kind of enter into that bigger world, right? And you rub shoulders with others who maybe didn't have the advantage of those experiences. What we realized with our students is that the way that the system is set up to mark and gauge achievement, it assumes that everybody's had all of these experiences that fit in this one kind of class of experiences. Everybody's been to summer camp. Everybody would know who a landscape architect is, for example. And that is just simply not the case. And also, more importantly, why are those things deemed the most important to understand? With that being said, we were an expeditionary learning school for students who weren't your typical demographic at that time of an expeditionary learning school, but we did everything. And then we also added this risk program into it where you take healthy risks. So we would take each year, each level, we would do something different with our students. Like kindergartners, they stayed the night at the school. First graders, they camped out on the field. And by the time that they got up to 8th grade, they were hiking all the way up, halfway up Pikes Peak, up to bar camp. Our 5th graders would go skiing because we had a partnership with some ski resorts, and they got to go skiing, to the point that one of our students in a student-led IEP, when she was asked, like, what are your strengths? She said, I'm a skier, among other things, right? It's those experiences and those deep learning experiences, along with all of these other things that that's not just a fringe or an add-on. That's part of the whole learning piece, and that's how you connect with the students, and it's how you connect with the families. But when we also think about it and we think about what is school and how do we engage with that, and where's the student voice and where's the parent voice, that has to be, at the forefront of your work. And I'm sorry if I went off on that, but Marisol got me going, so I blame her.
This is a conversation.
Yeah.
We can always continue because we always have more questions and more ideas to share. And I do want to throw out to anybody on Zoom or Facebook Live or anything, share your questions and comments with us, especially if you have any questions for these two wonderful educators as we head into our last 10 minutes or so. But I really want to hear from the two of you. You've led in so many ways and at so many levels. So when we think about these concepts like healing and this phrase that you have coined, the mindset and the Heartset, which I've never heard that term Heartset before you two generated this work. Like, just give us a little bit about what does that mean to you, and then what are some kind of next steps or ideas to be thinking on or trying for everyone we have out there in the TCC Learning Network?
So I'm gonna take this one. So you can read, I think it's Carolyn Dweck who talks about mindset. And that's really, it's part of your belief system and what you are set on. So when I talk about, I'll talk about restorative practices for a minute. But what became very clear to me, and I think even in equity work, any kind of these initiatives, is that this work is not it's not just something that you do. It's not just a training that you go to and boom, all of a sudden you're restorative and you're gonna, all of your disciplinary data is gonna be great and your kids are gonna be fine and there's gonna be all of this harmony. It's not just something that you do. This is about who you are and how you walk in this world. Do you walk in this world with the belief that all of our children, regardless of what their home circumstances are or what their zip code is, deserve a high quality public education? And what Carolyn described, which is all of those exposure and opportunities. When you believe that, that's part of your heart set. That is how you lead through your heart. Some people describe it as their passion or their values. For me, it's really about the work coming from here. And again, with restorative practices, are you restorative or are you not? Are you, if you're somebody that is punitive by nature and you want to hold on to that punitive and you want people to have consequences and and that is really firmly in you, then being restorative is going to be very hard for you. So you have a different kind of heart set. You have a more of a punitive heart set. So for me, it's this description. It helps for me to describe it. It helps me, describe what the difference is between just doing the work and really living the work. And again, it's about who you are. And I don't believe that we have any business doing any of this work if we're not doing our own work and being restorative in our lives, or if we're doing the work of our own healing. And the thing is that there is no end to this journey. You don't ever get there. It's a continuous journey and a continuous effort throughout your life.
And I wanted to just piggyback on that too. Like when I, in that reflective piece, for me, that heart set and mindset, it's really about, and we talk about in education about being critically reflective, right? And how that would play out often is, those days as an educator when the day just keeps on giving. We used to come to the end of the day when I was a principal, and we had this little checklist, did vomit? Check. Blood? Check. We had to, a staff member crying? Check. And sometimes you go through those. But then at the end of that process, you really think so hard about like, what were those high points and what do I need to do better, to really think this through so that we don't have the tears tomorrow. It was also, our teachers, our staff members who would come in and share the same kinds of stories, like, and it wasn't that it was the students. If the students just did X, Y, and Z, their world would be so much easier. It was that if I need to figure this out because somehow, this is not working the way it needs to, for our students, right? And so I think it's that really getting deep into your practice, but understanding that you are bringing yourself to your practice every day, and we are human beings. And life hits us. I don't know one person who hasn't been hit hard by life, and you come and you show up to work and you think you've got it, and guess what? You don't. And I feel that it's also having that understanding and having that network of support in a school around, that we as adults, we need to be there for each other so that we can all be there for the students, because a fragile adult in front of a fragile child can be incredibly damaging. So when I think about it that way, I really think about that as the mindset. And then piggybacking too on this concept of the Heartset. We used to talk in our school too about our students, and that you really needed to tell them that you loved them. And that you do that in a lot of different ways, right? I love the way that you support, the new student that comes in every day. I love the way that your smile just brightens up our room every day. When you hear love and you're in pain, that's a big thing in your world on that day. But one thing too that I realized way back in Hawaii is the first thing that our students could tell is if you're not coming at it from an authentic place. Like, and that's where that real knowing yourself, what Marisol was talking about, and having that heart set and mindset. I mean, that is that authenticity, and that is what makes that connection.
And I want to jump on there because I think the importance of love is so important, Carolyn. And you know what? Sometimes doing love is doing the hard thing.
Mhm.
Sometimes doing love, I'm going to love you so much that even though it's not what I want, and I had these conversations in the alternative charter high school, like this place, like your actions, like this is not the place you want to be. And because I love you and I care for you, like I'm going to have to help you find another place to be. And that, I mean, that's what love is. Love is having the hard conversations. Love is doing like the hard work, like, and I think that's just a really important thing to mention, because I think that's also goes back to us, and loving ourselves sometimes is the hardest thing to do.
And I can say, as a male teacher and one who has a passion for working with our youngest learners, I'm like about 6'2" or so, and not that big of a guy, but next to a 5-year-old, I'm a giant. Yeah. And something I've pushed for everywhere I've worked is not just my right, but my responsibility to tell and show students that I love them. And I think, for many reasons in education, we've become wary of men who love children. But then I think, moving away from that causes so much more harm and so much more damage when these people who will be the next men and women out in the world don't have those relationships. And I see Paul Bloomberg, who's a great example of this, sharing Paul Martuccio, one of our partner principals, that he tells those kids he loves them every day. And I just texted my wife to see if she could grab the book for me because I wanted to cite it. But one of my favorite authors, Leo Buscaglia, is known kind of jokingly as the love doctor. But he quotes Saint Exupéry from The Little Prince, and I'm going to maybe get it right, but that he says, perhaps love is simply my leading you gently back to yourself, or something along those lines. And that really formed, as a young man, my understanding of what it means to love, your family, to love your friends, to love anyone you build a relationship with. But Buscaglia takes it and says, he says, perhaps love, and he puts in parentheses, or for our purposes, education, is simply my leading you gently back to yourself. And as you're talking today, it's really, that's been coming back to me in waves, as Carolyn shared that story of the kinder student who's running and screaming every day, who becomes a third grader who's so excited to share. And Marisol, you shared this idea that like it all begins and ends with love. And so it's so powerful that we focus not only on that mindset, but that heart set. And so as we have just a few minutes left, I wonder if you'll share kind of what's that one thing you really want people to take with them about this work. And I know we've got some more big questions we want to hit, so we'll come back another time, another Tuesday or another Thursday, and share those. But I'll give you each a chance for that. And then just for fun, to end on a light note, we're going to do that little thing from Michael Ian Black's How to Be Amazing. So we'll share our own recommendations. Because we've gone deep and heavy, and as you guys have said, it's been a long, nonstop day, a great one, but packed, just like those principal days. So what are some things you want us to take with us? Not to put you on the spot after this deep hour-long conversation, to put it into a bumper sticker.
I think what I would like us to take with us, or to take from this, is that, and something that Marisol said earlier, is yes, it is being connected to yourself. It is being reflected. It is also being kind to yourself. And I do feel that, like, as we've talked about this tonight, this is hard work. And we know that a lot of our communities are in a lot of pain right now, and are suffering, right, nationally, and are really getting hit hard on top of being hit hard. And so as educators, we want to be everything for everybody. And when we're not able to do it, or we feel like we weren't at our best, I think that we are the best critics of ourselves as well. And so there's a Navajo story of how when the children are young, the children are brought out each day, and you look at the sun and you honor that the sun is there, and the sun rises and is born, and it sets and it dies, and every day it is born, the sun is born, and then it dies. And the thing is that each day is a day to have that fresh start. And to be kind to yourself, and to know, that when we're committed to this work, we are going to get there, and it's going to be hard, but every day is a chance for us to take this learning to the next level.
That's powerful. Thank you.
So, and for me, I'm going to share something that I share in almost every space that I'm in, and that's a poem called In La Quech, which is a Nahuatl, this Nahuatl belief that, and Nahuatl is the language of the Mayans, belief that we are each other, that you are me and I am you. You are the other me. So this is written by Luis Valdez, who is a famous Chicano playwright and director. He wrote and directed La Bamba. So In La Quech, tú eres mi otro yo. You are my other me. Si te hago daño a ti, if I do harm to you, me hago daño a mí mismo. I do harm to myself. Si te amo y respeto, if I love and respect you, me amo y respeto yo. I love and respect myself.
Wow. So I said, I don't want to try to make you sum up this hour in something brief, but you both did so well, and that poem really nails it. I want for everybody out there in the world to know you can find out more about how to connect with these two through Restored and Connected, and this great work they're doing in grounding us in ourselves and in our systems. Also, we hope that you'll keep connected with our learning network. We know that many of you are struggling right now as the expectations and the challenges for us as educators and for all of our students and their families are changing all the time. And we have some amazing people who've partnered to find some ways to make this work. We'd love to help you. And just, wait, is that next week? This month is flying by. Very soon, we'll be meeting with Jody Mills for another master class who's going to dig into something deeply connected to these ideas, which is these learning dispositions. And that really ties into that mindset and Heartset. We've just had a core chat earlier today. You can get on Twitter and search hashtag core chat and add to that discussion about readers' identities today. And you can see those others coming up. We'd love to have you join us for those. And also tomorrow, we're doing another live session at 2 p.m. Eastern with these amazing people. Paul and I get the opportunity to interview these three amazing educators who've helped to craft some some resources that we are confident will help you and your students really get as much as you can out of these virtual learning experiences. And just for fun, we wanted to stop kind of end rather on a light note. And I'm going to start doing this, but I borrowed it from Michael Ian Black, who used to have a podcast called How to Be Amazing. And I can't think of two better people to exemplify what it means to be amazing. And he would ask, for recommendations, a favorite book, favorite music, favorite food, whatever it might be. And I'm just going to open this up a little bit more generally. What recommendations can you make for us? What's something that's adding value to your life that you want to share out with our community? And same thing to those of you out there, if you want to throw in the chat what recommendations you have. I'm going to do a little bit of a silly one, but Carolyn brought it up. But this is one of my favorite comics of all time. And believe it or not, it came up in one of these conversations because it has this beautiful story of the bat. Yeah, see, Carolyn and I have matching copies. But it's Batman Legends of the Dark Knight from 1989. So I read it in like the 4th grade. And it has this mythology built in that just deeply impacted me. And I had to look back to see if it was that great. But I head to your local comic shop, wear a mask, and see if you can get a copy of that. But how about you two, Carolyn and Marisol? What can you recommend for our lives?
I am going to jump in, Marisol, and then I'm going to let you take us home. But the recommendation that I have is Marisol's mother's chicken mole recipe that she shared. And I'm a big slow cooker fan these days. I don't know why. I think it's a comfort food, but it's her mother's recipe, and she shared it with just some images and notes through a text, and sometimes we'll FaceTime, but I've been making that, and man, is it good. So good.
Now, is that a family secret, or is that something we could share out with people later if they're interested?
That's actually, it's so funny because Carolyn, I have yet to make it. So what happened is, so a really good friend of mine, Shelly Burgess, and then my sister Tia and our really good friend Angela, they've been wanting to learn how to make mole. So we made a date, and I asked my mom. So we went over, and Angela's actually the one who took the notes and took the pictures. And Shelly wrote a blog about it. So if you follow Be Like a Pirate, you can find the blog. I don't know if she put the recipe in there, but the recipe, what I shared with Carolyn, it's blocked because Angela took the notes. So Angela's not sharing them. So you'll have to get it from Carolyn. And so Carolyn the other day was making it, and she asked me something. She was like, "What do you do?" I was like, "Girl, I haven't made it. I don't know."
Yeah.
If I want mole, I call my mom. I'm like, "Mom." So Carolyn can send it out, and also we can look and see if I'll look for Shelly's blog also and see if she has the recipe on there.
It'll be a slightly altered Carolynized version, but it's so good.
Yeah, it includes Doña Maria, which is a jar. It's a jar of mole, and also you got to use chocolate Ibarra and peanut butter. So it's delicious. So there's a couple things I want to share. So one, this is like one of my favorite books, The Book of Joy. And I also really important to me in my development is Barking to the Choir, Father Greg Boyle. So just quick recommendations: Grandmother's Counsel the World, Joy Harjo, if you don't know her, she's actually a Nobel Poet Laureate. This one is Conflict Resolutions for Holy Beings. So it's a book of poems. And last, really powerful, The Conscious Parent by Dr. Shafali Sabari, phenomenal. And music, okay, super earworm. Moses Sumney. So that's the artist, and the song Cut Me. You have got to hear it. It is so beautiful what he does. So not just his lyrics and his voice and the vibe, but the horns. There's something very like 1970s about it, but it's also just very chill. And it's like, he's just, you just got to listen to it. I'm a big music person. I think find me on Spotify. You can follow my my playlist. It's called Ma Jams, M-A, and then Jams. I have almost 2,000 songs in there.
Nice.
So just very, very eclectic. But if just check out Moses Sumney, be your earworm.
And that made me have to share one more thing, which is one of my music recommendations is the Black Pumas, which is a group that's just been out there for a couple of years. But I'm throwing a YouTube link to Cut Me and to one of their more popular songs. But I recommend that entire album, Black Pumas. So we got to listen to a couple, hear a couple from us. So Carolyn, you add one more recommendation you have, and then we'll call it a night. Oh, and Dana just brought me the book. Living, Loving, Learning. Leo Biscaglia has such great wisdom on what it means to be a human and an educator at the same time. Given to me by my mentor when I was in college, Larry Conti.
Everybody's come home all at once in my household, so it's a little noisy. So one last recommendation, and then a recommendation on top of the recommendation, like on the mole recipe, by the way, just to go back to that for a second, because I'm a big mole fan. But also when you make food for other people, including like when you have the opportunity, when we will again be back together with our staff and our students, when you make food and you bring food in, right? That's a way to say like, I love you. So going back to that theme of love, right? It is like, that's from your heart. And then one book recommendation is, this is my favorite, The Deepest Well by Nadine Burke. When I read this, I knew I wasn't crazy in terms of what I was understanding about, what we were experiencing at our school and some of the things that we put into play. But she talks about these 6 components of care. And those are ways that we can start to heal as well. So very cool, amazing book. And I love her. She's the Surgeon General of California now, with pediatrician out of a really interesting neighborhood in San Francisco. So that's what I got.
And Cindy recommended a filthy chai latte. It's espresso in chai tea latte, and she says it tastes just like fall. And Paul shared this wonderful quote from Mahatma Gandhi. I offer you peace. I offer you love. I offer you friendship. I see your beauty. I hear your need. I feel your feelings. My wisdom flows from the highest source. I salute that source in you. Let us work together for unity and love. And with that, we'll close. Thank you, as always, for sharing your 2 most valuable possessions, your time and attention. And we will see you next time.
Good night, everybody.